Let's go.
Let's go ahead and start the work session.
You shut the door, Joe, if you
April
would.
3rd. Thank you, Joe. Go ahead and start the work session. Who wants to kick it off?
Well, Commissioners, we have two items on as a work session. Which one would you like to address first?
Well, let's go with the first one.
Yeah. Which one's that?
Well, let's not go with let's go with the Jeff's issue second, and let's go.
Yeah, let's go down. Yeah, let's
So
get the other one away
you want to do
first.
the water one first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say water. The utility relocation
Yes.
one first. Okay. Well, Commissioners, as directed, you have a policy. Last week, I was asked to be put on a work session so that we could discuss, before we adopt the policy, sending out something or connecting with some of these utility companies in advance before we actually adopt the policy. So therefore, this is on your work session versus an action item. The policy, I believe, addresses what we discussed as far as having agreements in place that, or the utilities are already regulated to bid their work before we agree to do a project in an area, that we have to have agreements in place that they will move their utilities via a competitive bid process if it's going to exceed $25,000. The reason this didn't come forward before is there was legislation proposed at the state level, and we kind of wanted to see how that played out. Well, obviously, that has died for the year, like everything else you mentioned earlier in this meeting. So here's your policy. It's on for discussion, and I'm just looking for guidance from the Board of County Commissioners on how you'd like to proceed, either moving this to an agenda or waiting and allowing a certain amount of time for communications to the utilities, letting them know this is coming, however you decide.
So to just kind of generalize what we're talking about, whenever we spend taxpayer dollars on a project, we always have to go out for bid and get the lowest bid.
Consider the lowest bid.
Lowest responsible bid is required.
Yeah.
Yes.
And all other government agencies have to do the same thing. What we ran across was water districts don't have to do that. So we don't care if it's a private project and they're working on somebody individual. Yeah, but whenever taxpayer dollars are involved, we're just asking that the water district please go out for bid on the project before we turn over taxpayer dollars to them for that project. And I know of two different instances where one of them was a $500,000 difference. We got a bid to do the project. Yeah. Went out for bid. It was $500,000 less than the water department ended up getting the contractor to do it for. So that was $500,000 taxpayers' money that wasn't used on something that went out for bid. We're just trying to address that.
So there's one other nuance to it, and that is most utilities fall under the KCC, which require them to actually bid their work. Counties and other government entities fall under the state statute that requires us to bid our work. But there is a gap on rural water districts, and that is specifically, this will address that. But if there would be any other utility that we would come across, it would also address that with them as well. But to our knowledge, that's really the only utilities that are impacted by this policy.
And we don't want the process and progress impeded. So,
as we discussed earlier in the meeting, it's hard to get something accomplished after the fact. So once we've designed a project and we've got grant funding, it's pretty tough for us to hold the line and take the stance that we aren't going to do the project. Even though, so the water districts then have the ability, I'm not saying they all do it, but some have the ability then to hold our project hostage and make an expenditure that we don't agree with because they haven't bid the work.
Yeah.
I'm not stating that the work is necessarily going to cost less or more because they didn't bid it. It's just that there's that potential, and we want an open process like we do with all of our own projects.
well, it is not a reasonable sum that has been put forth. When you run into a $500,000 difference between the two, that is that reasonable? And there's some.
Commissioners, I think Mark hit upon another point. The timing issue, the timing element here is very, very critical. If you recall what the county did at East McIntyre, That project was shut down for several months.
Right.
On the issue.
With change order.
The 147th Street project actually
Yeah, 147.
actually got
Change
delayed
orders.
into another year, which hit us with change orders for $200 and some thousand as our project was delayed.
Right.
So
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In implementing this, it says, in an effort to save citizens' taxpayer dollars, the county will sign perpetual agreement with a utility that agrees to stay. Does that mean, like, when you're looking at water districts, are you going to ahead of time go out to the water districts and ask them to sign these agreements?
Commissioners, I think that if this policy is approved, and what I stated last time in work session was that I will be contacting all of the water districts via certified mail. I will be asking them to respond to that certified mail at this time and say whether or not they are willing to have a discussion or agree to bid these items within the scope of our work as an addendum to the contract so that we can bid that as a separate item so we know the individual cost. For those areas that within the water districts that state that they will not, I have reached out already to a few verbally, and they told me to save the postage. So I know that there will be areas in the county that they will not agree to this policy. And so what we would do then is we would not be moving forward with any design services for bridges or roads within those water districts until a point in the future that we do reach some sort of agreement. So one of the issues that you'll see moving forward, just so I'm clear, is that in some bridge projects, we don't have water line conflicts. Often, culvert extensions, and you would have the water line if it's out adjacent to it. We don't know if that relocation effort until after the design is going to be $25,000 or more. We don't know the size of the line necessarily. So there'd be a lot of factors that were unknown going into a bridge project. So once the water district declares that they will not participate in this open bidding and to ensure that the taxpayer dollars are being spent in a fair and competitive process, then it would exclude that water district boundary from future projects unless the board repeals
So we could be letting other governing bodies exclude large portions of the county from any kind of road development by the decision of that other governing body, not the decision of the county commissioners whether those road improvements are needed in that area. It would be simply dictated under this policy by the decision of the local rural water district.
Yes, currently, as you guys are aware, I did go testify to the committee regarding this. Without that legislative statutory requirement, then we do not have the leverage to force the water districts to bid this work. So they would have the option to state that they are not willing to sign an agreement with the county and enter into any type of requirement to bid work over $25,000, and in that event, their board would dictate the fact that projects were not going to enter into design within their boundaries.
So if they, let me give an example. In Alexandria Township, we talked about the wooden bridge. Let's say the wooden bridge needs to be replaced because of tonnage for school buses. Let's say then that the rural water district decides that they're not going to sign this agreement and that bridge needs to be replaced. What's the option for the Board of County Commissioners?
Well, you could either act in a manner that would contradict the policy, or that project would not move forward into design or construction until the point that we did enter into an agreement with the water district. That bridge would remain there until the point that the KDOT inspections that are required by yearly deem it unsafe to travel, and it would be closed.
Close it.
So then the road would just be unusable because not of the decision of the Board of County Commissioners and our capital improvement plan that we have developed with staff to decide where improvements are needed. It would be the decision of a rural water district determining what road improvements will be made.
To speak to the capital improvement plan, as you guys reviewed it last week as it was originally proposed, and no matter whether amendments are made to it or not, you guys are aware that these projects are multi-year projects. So generally year one you do design, year two you do acquisition, year three you do construction. And so it is a multi-year project. And so once that location does not meet this new policy, we would have to revise the CIP to include structures and roads and bridges that are in need of repair and replacement that are found within the areas of the county that we can comply with the current policy. So I would be offering up a new proposed CIP at the point that I have contacted all of the water districts and we were aware of the areas that were agreeable to bidding the work over $25,000.
So what I'm looking at is maybe before we move forward with this, we should poll or get information from all the rural water districts and find out if it's going to be the majority are not going to agree to this, or what's the effect of silence if they don't return a response? I suppose that means that they're excluded.
I would make the assumption that the lack of response would be in the negative category and that they would not be willing to comply. If they're willing to comply, I assume that they would be willing to either give us a call, send us an email, or return some sort of poll with the information requested, whether it's just checking a box of yes, we will comply with these factors, and we'd be open to engaging the county staff in entering into an agreement.
I think commissioners, it would be good to send what the proposed agreement is, and obviously there might be some negotiation back and forth on the exact language of the agreement, but I think it would be good to send the agreement and say, please provide your comments back to this agreement on whether or not you are interested in proceeding, because I do think, because there's no way we can wait until a project has to happen, or we shouldn't.
Right.
Before we have the agreement, I think we should try to get these in advance, and all we're asking is that on projects that we're going to pay for, that's something to be taken into consideration. We're paying for these projects, not the water districts. We're just asking that they bid the work. That way they don't use a vendor who has no bids in to do the work. And it's, again, not because the vendor may not necessarily be cheaper. It's because there's the opportunity for us to not be following what state statutes require of us already, what the KCC requires of other utility companies. It really kind of boggles the mind that this would be a problem for any water district when it's our cost, not theirs. So if it comes in more expensive, that's on us, and we own it.
Right.
That's that's what the state statutes are.
And if the water district wants to use their contractor,
They could.
they can.
And if
It's
it-
just that we're only going to pay for the lowest qualified bid
Right.
and replace the
And-
line size that's there, not upgrade it to an 8-inch. It's a 2-inch. or-
Absolutely. If they have a preferred vendor they want to use, they can continue to use them. It's
Right.
just that we're only going to pay what the bid says. And if they want to pay additional to that, it's on them.
Yep.
And maybe they can negotiate it. Who knows?
That's everybody way everybody does it.
And if it drags the time out longer, we understand that. If they have to wait a little bit longer to get the bids, we understand that.
Well,
So
we
should
would
we-
bid the project as an addendum to our contract.
Yep.
Because we would not, in the agreement, it would state that we are going to bid this as an ad alternate to our bid documents, and we would include any water line plans. We would still have to pay their contracted engineer for design of their water line that is being replaced, and then we would add that information into our construction drawings, and we would bid that as an ad alternate. And so that would be clearly laid out. We would not ask that the water districts enter into their own bid process unless they were going to relocate the water line in advance of the projects. In most cases, County Route 30, for instance, they are relocating the water line currently with their on-call contractor. But if we have sections of roadway with 14 feet of cut, and we have other sections with 10 foot of fill, and so they are putting it far enough out from the center line of the roadway that it's not going to be a conflict with the project. But if you were to do it during construction and you were to issue them a easement or a perpetuation of their senior rights of their document, recording of their easement, then you could probably save money because you're no longer going through a giant rock section and cut. You're putting it at the fringe of your right-of-way through a section that has already been excavated.
Right. And that's what made the Eisenhower project run pretty smooth. Nobody held anything up because of the utilities.
And we understand their hindrance on going out for bid on every little tiny project We understand that would be cumbersome. We're not talking about that. We're only talking about ones that are involving taxpayer dollars.
So I 100% support the idea here, but I think that the devil's always in the details. Because I believe if you go out, how many water districts do we have in the county? 12, 13? I don't know.
13.
Find out how many of those water districts are going to comply with it. I mean, we should pass this on. This is another issue should be passed in Topeka, and it got tabled. But so it should be a piece of state legislation. But as far as us adopting this policy, I'd like to know how many water districts are going to be in agreement with complying with this before we adopt the policy, so that we're aware of how much of the county we have just taken out of.
I think that
I
was
agree.
that was
Maybe
more.
it should be sent out. They can.
Yeah, the guys.
ask for.
That was Mark's recommendation,
I think
and I suggest we do
We
that.
could send that out, but I think to be fair, voluntary compliance is what we've already asked for and not received.
Yeah.
So if you're asking them, will you voluntarily comply with, do this?
No, they have
I'm
to
asking
start
for
doing.
input on
I
that.
think
Yep.
you know the answer already.
Yep.
There are 2 or 3 water districts that we know we've worked with in the past that will likely say no problem. But I think you should be prepared that there's no carrot or stick here for them, because they don't know what projects this might be.
I don't want to see the county, when we have the CIP list that is important projects based on objective standards like traffic counts, economic development, where we need to replace a bridge because it's going to get to where school buses can't pass, and we allow a water district because of their decision to limit development or limit road improvements, rather than the decision be made by the Board of County Commissioners. And that's an important.
But people come to our meetings. People can go to water district meetings. And I'd like to see it make sure that it's clear that we do not pay for upsizing lines. I mean, we should be paying for whatever line size there is. Then, if they want to upsize it, it's on
That's
them.
cool. Yeah.
And what I testified to in Topeka, and what to elaborate a little bit on what Mark said, water districts are the only quasi-municipal entity that I'm aware of that gets to operate in a true monopoly and does not have a statutory requirement to bid their work, even in the event that it's being paid for by taxpayer funds. So if you look at library districts, school districts, fire districts, museums, any other entity that gets taxpayer funds would be required to do capital projects through a bidding process. Water districts are the only entity that I'm aware of that are excluded from that.
Right.
We do not have a carrot or a stick because the state killed the bill again this year.
I think if you asked any of our developers that have to work outside of where the rural or the city waters are, you would find that they have issues. They run into the same issues we do. It's not that that they are treating us differently than they treat anybody else. The developers run into the same problem.
Yeah.
So you come in, you want to put a development out into the rural area, you're going to pay whatever the water district says you're going to pay, or you're not going to get water.
And one other issue that we're going to try to clean up, not clean it up in a manner that would be appropriate for the KCC, but another issue is that some of these water districts, they record their outer boundary through a document of the KCC declaring this is our water district location. And through the course of development in the county, they have expanded because they were the nearest water district to a given location that was going to see residential development and was paying for an upgrade to the line or an extension of their water district to that location. Well, that legal description was not updated, and so we will need to try to verify a little bit some of our mapping of the water districts to make sure we're clear on which area is being serviced by which provider around some of the areas that maybe have not been updated with the KCC.
And if a water district wanted to remain in private easement, would we be responsible for, I know we offered to let it be in the right-of-way and that we would pay for any future projects to move that line even though it's in the right-of-way. Would it be possible they said, well, we want to remain in private easement, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to be in private easement? Would we be paying for that?
Well, Commissioners, the whole idea of this is to get, I'll term it this way, to get a commitment, a moral commitment even, to bid out anything over $25,000 that involves a county project being paid for by the county. Paragraph 5 begins, the parties shall in each instance of relocation confer and agree upon which of the parties shall be responsible, blah, blah, blah. Those discussions, this can be tailored for specific projects. What's important, though, in paragraph 5 is that the concept of public bidding for a county project in excess of costs for the relocation costs more than $25,000 be publicly bid. If the district wanted to put their line in a private easement, they would have the right to do so, but the difference would be on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if they had a private easement and they were going to go out of ours into it because our project was going to go over the top of it and they had to require
Right,
new
we're
private
not going to
easement,
pay for
I
theirs.
think they most likely would hit us with that bill.
Yeah, they're going to require us to pay for the private easement. We have junior rights. If we have a 30-foot right-of-way and they have a 10-foot utility easement for a water line adjacent to our existing right-of-way, then we acquired 20-foot additional right-of-way over the top of their existing easement. They have senior rights, and we would be required, unless they want to forfeit their right of their senior rights, we would be required to, if they don't agree to put it in the right-of-way, to purchase the additional right-of-way easement for their line.
Even if our project was designed and had a utility easement in it,
Yeah, it
for
doesn't
everybody,
matter.
it doesn't matter.
They have senior rights.
So, but we could also just take that over and hire our own right-of-way acquisition folks to go do that and on behalf of the water district.
I think that they would probably have the statutory.
Have to be within an agreement.
Yeah, it'd have to be within the
Well-
agreement. We could demand or request.
But this is a start.
Yeah.
It's a
I
start,
think
yeah.
that, yeah, we should get input from the water districts on
It's
this.
a start,
I mean, they may bring up something that we missed.
What kind of a time frame would you like to allow for their response?
Well, they only meet once a month, so
So
60
60 days at least,
I'd
probably?
say
Yeah, 60 sounds good, Doug.
A lot of them's meeting this week.
I just hope that they will actually respond.
I can know one.
So we'll send them a copy of the
Well, not
policy and a
move
copy of
forward
the
because somebody
potential.
doesn't respond.
Yep.
And give them,
I mean, that's kind of like, sorry, it's
Okay.
like, and you have parent-teacher conferences.
I
and
guess,
people are invited to come
depending
and
on
you
those
don't.
responses and how the board
Commission.
decides to go forward, that could make a
Sorry.
significant impact on the CIP. So,
Yeah.
Well,
just to be aware.
I'll
Yeah,
tell you what, I think this board deciding on the roads comes ahead of them.
well, but I think that we need to make sure that we have policies in place that indicate why something hasn't occurred
Let the
Yeah,
pressure go on.
we're heading in.
and put the pressure where it
Well,
belongs. I mean,
Like I said, I'm just not willing to totally abdicate on
Yeah,
it.
but we're heading in the right direction. This is get the ball moving.
And we want to make sure that they understand we're just talking about projects
Yep.
that involve
With
taxpayer
public-
dollars, not every project
Yeah.
we work
yeah,
on.
we don't
'Cause
care about their,
They-
there's
what they
several
wanna do.
water district employees that I talked to, they thought we meant every project. So I want to make
And
sure
that's the
that-
way it went at the Topeka level.
Yeah.
It didn't just say road projects, taxpayer money.
Yeah. When
And
you-
I will tell
It
you,
got expanded.
and I foresee a lot of the water districts that we'll get responses from. When the water district has an on-call contractor who does both their breaks for their water lines,
Right, after our calls.
and their upgrades of their service lines or their just general work, those folks are more than likely going to have some opposition to this. And then the water districts that have full-time staff that go out and do their breaks,
Yeah.
but then when they have large projects where they want to replace a line, they do bid that work out already. Those water districts will be fine with it because we will offer KDOT certified inspectors on every project, and we will allow the water district to come out and inspect the work on a daily basis anytime they want to. And so that's kind of the process for those water districts that are already employing staff to be their on-call, if it's a staff on-call. But if it's a true on-call contractor who does both their service and their breaks, those are the water districts that appear to have opposition.
we shouldn't
But
have to pay for
We
somebody
know the work don't
to
always
gouge
get
the
work, so.
taxpayers.
well.
And it'd be good to get their feedback, because maybe their feedback would say, we'd rather have the number be 50,000. I'd just like to hear their feedback.
Yeah, we'll reach out to them.
Yeah, we could up it. Yeah, get up the dollar amount. I'm not opposed to that.
Okay, so we have a plan. That's
Clear
what
as
we'll
mud.
do. That's what we'll do. Next.
Can we just start this one too?
Yeah, so this is the CIP as requested and by Commissioner Culbertson and the Board of County Commissioners for changes to our current CIP, identifying projects in the north end of the county.
Okay, but before we do that, do we need to talk about this urban, the adjustment of the urban boundary in Tonganoxie? Because this could segue into the CIP if 222nd Street comes into this.
Well, I think that one, the urban boundary that you have is a map that was provided, I think, from Mid-American Regional Council. If you remember, we worked in cooperation with the city of Basel to update their FHWA map. And it took us probably 2 to 3 months to work that out with Mid-American Regional Council and Basel and the county, and we were involved in that process. This one we were not involved in. We just received it from Mid-American Regional Council, and they believe it was approved administratively at the city. So I had just provided it to you. It's really nothing for us to take action on. Apparently, we don't have any input into that. I've provided to you for that. I don't know that it impacts our CIP except for maybe a few of the roads that are in that area if the city is saying with that map that they're willing to take those over.
Well, how does it
If
affect? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if County Road 1 developed, like our plan, you don't think the city of Tonga would annex all the way to I-70?
Well, I think that map makes sense. It's just it's what does it do for it could impact our ability to get grants directly from KDOT. It may mean that we have to go to Mid-American Regional Council. I don't know that that's been
But see, we have some
clarified.
county routes that run through this. And,
So I found it unusual that I did not see that map until it was being presented at the Highway Committee for approval, and I made a request for it. We met multiple times with Mark's staff and Baser staff and worked in collaboration in order to minimize the area being affected by the classification of roads to the urban roadway classification. It's designated by census tracts and population densities. The city of Tonganoxie did not have any roads in the previous census that were classified as urban roadways. We reduced the area around the city of Basel to the bare minimum to ensure that those roadways, all other roadways that weren't absolutely required by the census tracts, were not included, so we could get KDOT funding moving forward. I was told by Mark's staff yesterday that these roads, even though they have now become part of the Tonganoxie urban boundary, are still eligible for KDOT funding. That contradicts the previous statements regarding the city of Basel. But I just wanted to make sure it was clear that we presented at the staff level the changes around the city of Basel and made sure that we accepted that from a board approval perspective. This map was not presented to staff.
Why is that, do you think? That it wasn't?
Well, the Mid-American Regional Council never notified us of it, and the city of Tonganoxie never reached out to us. And both happened in the case of the city of Basel. Staff from Basel reached out to me first, and then
It's not working in plan.
and then staff from
I noticed that.
Mid-American Regional Council after the fact reached out to us as well. So this could potentially impact funding sources. It could impact your highway taxes that you receive from the county. It'd be minimal in that respect, but it was administratively approved from my understanding and the information I received from the Mid-American Regional Council at a staff level from the city of Tonganoxie.
We were asked to participate in funding on 222nd and Kansas Avenue.
Yes, this does not change the responsibilities
What?
necessarily.
I know, but I mean, it
makes a
seems
county
like
road
if you're going to swallow that up, the county might have been in the loop on this, especially if it's going to fall under the new climate action thing where you got the 14 bullet points you got to check off.
Well,
Do we really want to do an electric car charge study on these roads?
Yeah, if we have to go through the Mid-America Regional Council for grant funding, as we discussed when they were here, it's very unlikely that county projects get funding through that process just because of the scoring.
And
If we go to KDOT, we've been very successful of getting KDOT funds. Bill's been very successful at getting KDOT funds. So if this prohibits us from going directly to KDOT, it could mean that our grant funding for that area is dried up.
Well, then that's just the way that it goes, because obviously then Tonganoxie wants to take care of it on their own.
And I assume they projected, between KDOT and Mark's staff, they projected where the census population density would be at in 10 years in order to generate the area around the city of Basehor. So they projected growth around the city of Basehor so that map would be accurate at 10 years. They try to stay 10 years in advance. That's how the city of Basehor and the county was able to reduce the area down to just what was currently meeting the requirement. So more than likely, I could say that boundary could have been reduced had it been evaluated to see where is the minimum area that we could reduce that to in order to maximize our future funding sources.
Well, then obviously Tonganoxie wants to maximize theirs through Mid-America Regional Council, and I think that we just let them go with that. I mean,
Yeah.
not that we let them. I mean, that's just the way that it's going to be. So it's like, okay, cool. We don't need to concern about that, right?
It's too hard to get done unless you check
Well,
it
but
off.
that's not.
I'm not sure that that's
Then that's
totally
not on
their
us.
position.
Well, but that's
I
not
think
on
it's a
us. This was
Yeah.
administratively done and agreed upon and discussed with the Mid-America Regional Council and the administration of Tonganoxie. Obviously, this is what they want, and so it should be respected, and we don't need
I
to.
think it's a communication thing. We need to reach out to them and find out more details about this.
It's a little
Well,
late.
it's done.
Well, I know, but
So-
what their intent was.
But it's done. It's done.
It
and
is done, but that doesn't mean, I'm not sure what that impacts all these other road projects.
Well, we can't apply. Well, we can try to apply to it, but we can't apply to KDOT now that this has happened. So.
Yeah,
You're right.
that's pretty difficult to do.
No, and we just have to communicate. I think my issue with Tonganoxie is I feel like there's a lot of lack of communication. And I'm not going to even try to assign blame for that, but it's just a problem.
I mean, it don't make
That'd
sense.
make more sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's where the road was supposed to be.
I mean,
That was going to answer all
So
the
CIP?
problems up
Yep.
north to get all that
Please.
tax money down there.
Let's go.
You ready to
Right,
move on?
I
to
didn't mean
move
to
into
get off
this,
there.
I'll
I
move
just-
it on to the CIP real quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep this moving. There's two packets that were prepared by Public Works at Commissioner Culbertson's request. The first packet is a road dust abatement groups 1 through 14 that were prioritized by Commissioner Culbertson in a manner that he deemed appropriate for his districts. The second map is a traffic count map that also shows the residential building permits that have been pulled since 2020. It is lacking 2024 information, but it should have been a zero. There has not been a residential building permit pulled in the first quarter. The second packet is a revised CIP that the Commissioner Culbertson came down and we reviewed the projects in order to see what projects would need to be removed from the CIP for his projects that he has proposed to be funded. It did require the removal of 5 bridge replacements and move those to the unfunded list. It removed the potential grant cost share with the city of Tonganoxie for any improvements to the access road to the industrial park. And it removed the 2006 sales tax project for Fairmount Road safety improvements. And so I highlighted the projects that would need to be removed in order for this to be accomplished without bonding, and highlighted the dust abatement groups in the order that they would be able to be paid for as part of the CIP. So
What, on the high-risk rural road, the Fairmount, the old 2006 sales tax, I mean, that would be a match, right?
We would be definitely applying for funding for the section between 155th Street. It would be two separate applications, just
Right.
like Tonganoxie Road. We would try to do 147th Street to K7, and then 147th to 155th. 155th is one of the hot spots that we have in the original CIP packet that I presented that has a number of injury and fatality accidents. And so between the number of accidents that we had and the fact that it was on the 2006 sales tax, that's why from a staff perspective, we did propose that project as part of the CIP.
Question?
HP 51 though, I mean, we've been talking about that for years, whether we even needed to replace that bridge.
7 cars a day, and the detour would be almost nothing.
Well, yeah, because the property owner lives right there, and he could go out, and the others would go out.
And there's no reason to keep that. I mean,
We've been talking about it, I mean, back when I was working, that was definitely a possibility when that bridge came to end of life, that we
Just
would
close
just
it?
do it away, close it. Because it's not.
And that's exactly what I was talking about, building a triage list. It doesn't make sense to spend $1 million on a bridge that is hardly ever used. And you guys have been talking about that for years.
Yeah.
It sounds
and
like.
and when there's access from other access points, then what difference? I mean, that
It's
to me,
not
that
like-
doesn't. That's not going to impact.
And so the way I come up with this list is some of these, like that bridge, I don't think we need to do at all. Some other bridges that are down around the Panasonic new area, before we spend any money on those, I think we need to kick those down the road a little bit to see what kind of assisted financing.
And that's the
we can
ones
get.
we have the match on?
Well,
but no,
ones that aren't even up
No,
yet.
we're going forward.
But
with
are they?
them, 'cause
Okay.
They're being.
I
bid
just
already.
before you even start this, I just want to ask a macro question. On our 7 dust abatement groups that we did, the total cost for those 7 dust abatement groups was about $7.5 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and about $3 million of that was spent in the southern part of the county, and the rest was dotted throughout the county. But we didn't have any in the north, which that was the issue. Which I don't have any issue at all with spending some for a project up there. But I just want to throw it out there. I do not think $11 million is going to happen, because that would be more than we spent on the entire county.
Whoa, you're talking about the dust
On the dust
abatement.
abatement road.
But I'm talking about all those. See the map that has the highlighted gravel roads that are paved in the south end. Those weren't all on the dust abatement group.
But County Road 30, which is going to cost $12 million, is also not on the dust abatement road, and it directly benefits the northern part of the
Right,
county,
right.
which is something I've supported, doing anything we can to support the northern part of the county.
I understand.
And
But
I
you-
would be more than happy to fund like Project 1, but I cannot. We don't have the resources to fund $11 million with some new road.
But you're comparing apples to oranges. You're saying we're only comparing the dust abatement group to the north end of the county, the south end of the county. Those roads that have been paved were not all on the dust abatement group. So that's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
We're
what you're
talking
saying.
about the dust abatement right now, adding projects for the northern end of the county. And I'm just telling you that $11 million or $12 million is certainly, I believe, my opinion is we could fund number 1.
Okay, let's
and
use
get
what you're
started.
saying. Let's use what you're saying.
And because we're already funding $12 million
I'm glad you
for
brought
County
that.
Road 30.
I'm glad you said that, Mike. Let's use what
And
you're
that's-
saying. Let's use your idea.
Right.
Add up how much it costs for all those highlighted roads. It's way more than $7 million. So what are you saying?
But we've also talked about up in Kickapoo Township, you have more percentage of paved roads up there than most of the other townships in the county already.
You're including state highway.
Well, but it's paved surface, hard surface
But
roads.
you're including state highway. That's
But
irrelevant.
when we're talking about folks that live in Alexandria or folks that live in Tonganoxie Township, they have a lot more percentage of non-paved roads. So I'm for getting started on the list,
Okay.
Jeff.
That's good.
But I'm not. I certainly don't think we have the resources to do $12 million.
Okay.
Is there any, did we go through all the road improvement and traffic impact money in your townships? Because that's what we depleted when we did the dust abatement.
I know it was at one point. I'm not sure where it's at today.
Yeah, a lot of that funding was spent on E58 for Easton Township, and
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it was all
surprise.
Yeah.
That's right.
The bridge Banesh said we had another 20 years.
Right.
the spending, the township funds are all depleted as part of the CIP, so there isn't any money left from those.
Sherman Township had almost $1 million sitting there doing that.
Evaluation.
We
Evaluation.
spent that
Well,
on
it's
bridges.
we used to collect the road improvement fee and traffic impact money.
Yep.
We stopped doing that.
We spent that on bridges already too.
And so,
No, I mean, I know when we spent that, but I'm just saying, they had funds back in them days.
So if we funded, say, Project 1, that would, with the cost of being $610,000 a mile, Project 1's going to run about $950,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Approximately, yes.
You can have my bridge.
So I think that's get that on the CIP, but I don't agree with taking any of these other projects off of the CIP. We've been talking about bridges being so important. Now, if there's bridges that are redundative, like you said, they definitely should be on the list to come off. But overall, we have a lot of bridges that need replaced, and we've talked about that here.
But we haven't went through this list, like, I just seen the Jameson deal. And I don't know if there's any others that are like that.
well, and that's what I started.
I don't
bring up.
think there is, but I mean, I just remember this one being discussed over and over. And we even thought back when KDOT used to pay you money to do away with the bridge, doing that. But we didn't.
And that's
we
why-
used it on another project over Stranger Creek.
Well, Jeff, can you reach out to that property owner or somebody reach out to that or
Yeah.
or that person and just say this is what is being considered? Because I don't think I personally, well, that's in my district, and I don't have a problem at all with reaching
Well, I don't
out
either,
and
'cause, I
saying
mean-
because there's
Traffic.
another way of accessing that.
And some of the other ones,
Just to let them know what we're talking about.
because they'd put them on a cul-de-sac. They'd probably like that.
I mean, just to communicate.
And some of the other bridges on here, Mike, were like the Sherman 33 is close enough to the Panasonic plant that before we spend any money on developing that bridge, we should see what matching funds the state or.
Which was definitely what we've been trying to do.
So that's on here.
And it's been successful.
So,
Yeah.
so all these ones that I'm proposing to bump, if they're important, I'm just proposing to bump them down 1 or 2 years. But half of them, I don't think we need to do at all.
I'll interrupt you there.
Okay.
They're not bumping down 1 or 2 years. They're removed.
Okay.
They are removed.
But we could put them back on at the end of the 5 years.
At the end of the 5
Only if
years,
there's
but
money.
if they're not on, I'm not going to apply for grants for them because we don't have the funding without bumping your
Mike,
projects
let me,
back off the list.
hey, one thing too. Mike,
Without taking his projects off, if we decided to fund number 1 to get started put it on the CIP, could we fund that without having to bump other projects off or bridges off?
No, if you took HP.
If you took HP 51 off, you could do some, or if you took the Fairmount Road is paid for with sales tax funds, and we set aside $900,000 for design and right-of-way acquisition because it'll be very.
Take it off or bump it back?
You'd bump it back.
Bump it back.
And that
Bump
would
it
be
back how far though?
Yeah.
At least a year. Just to put Dust Abatement Group 1, you'd be bumping that whole project a year. You could bump the bridge off. That doesn't quite, I don't think, pay for the entirety of Dust Abatement Group.
So if we work one of these on, like we just say, we'll work one of these on to the CIP right now, number 1, you've got 12, we could, and we make it a goal that we'll
one
work
a year.
more onto the
Do
list
one a year.
later, but we at least get one on there,
That's all I'm asking for.
and
If you
bump
wanted-
that one bridge back a year, we could leave our CIP otherwise undisturbed.
I think we would remove that bridge is what was discussed,
The
right?
HP.
Because it's
HP
got
51.
Oh,
low
remove it.
traffic and
And it's
it's
not
okay.
needed. There's
Yeah, it
another
doesn't-
way to get in and out.
you know, one thing too, I tend to agree. I think when I supported Chairman Culverson on this, I didn't support doing a million thing. I wanted to get started. So I think the idea of getting the one on there to show that we're going to sit in that direction. I don't want to redo the entire CIP or all these issues when y'all have gone through them and noticed it. Now, there are some things that are probably we can redo and take off, and I think a couple have mentioned. But my goal was to get start and then see what we've got as we go down the line, but not throw a bunch of them out there because there's a lot of areas that are in need. I just wanted to make sure that area was starting to get some help up there.
Yeah, and that's all I'm asking for. This was just this is a work in progress.
I know, Jeff. I know.
Right.
I do have a question for you. On 159th Street there, close to the military base, is it not a possibility we could get some matching funds from the military to hard surface that road because of security concerns?
Yeah, maybe so. I talked to Bill about that too, because
Which
we
is-
got them to clear all the brush off of their side. And
He has the contact information for the person who you would need to talk to about that.
Okay.
I think maybe we get this one on there, and if we get that, then that's a match.
Because that road there was on the participatory road program, and you couldn't get the federal government to give right away, so that killed that project. So there is some history there.
Yeah.
There is history.
That is the only road in the county that had nearly, there was one property owner that withheld, and there was the federal government that couldn't sign off on the document. But of the participatory road program that the residents could have signed up for in 2015, that road was by far the one that was the closest to being completed.
That's what I'm saying. I was
Yeah.
here. I
So-
remember.
yeah,
If I'm hearing everyone correctly, the direction that you're providing is to take dust abatement group 1, or approximately $1 million if it's not dust abatement group 1, and just say a dust abatement group, and put that in approximately 2026 or 2027, where HP 51 is. Remove HP 51 for the time being for future determination of whether it be closed. That bridge has transverse cracking across an arch deck. It's concrete, and so at some point they will close it because it's fracture critical. Yeah, and yeah, it has been.
That's what we've been talking about it for years.
No, I just think
But-
that's
And then revise it just to accommodate approximately $1 million and bring that CIP back as a
I think the
draft.
sooner that, Bill, I think the next year, the sooner the better.
we need to do something next year though, not 27.
And I think
I
that's
think
what I was
26
going
is
with
the
it.
soonest we could actually even do one because not just the funding, but also the planning.
right. You have
These
to get
take a
everything.
year, but we could start on it and get
And
ready.
I think that's the
prepared.
key. I think that's the key. We know there's a long process to this, but the earlier the better.
And that would just move Fairmount Road back.
Yep.
I just
remove
think that
HP.
Fairmount Road was promised to the voters. In fact, we collected that data probably, the crash data in 03, 04 for the 2006 sales tax. And it met the criteria 20 years ago that it needed to be upgraded, and that's what the voters passed in 06, and it didn't get done.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
But I also,
drive it.
I just
But I'm not
wanna-
saying kick it. I'm not.
Right.
I'm saying
And I'm not saying
you
get rid of it.
you can't kick it back.
Yeah.
I'm just saying
But
you
that-
don't want to drop it completely because
Yeah.
the voters.
But that's the
it's owed
point.
to the voters.
And that's the point I'm trying to make
most
is on the
minimal
sales
change.
tax.
The most minimal changes in 2026, if you remove any possible cost share funding for a grant with the city of Tonganoxie that we had set aside $500,000 for in 2026, and you reduce the amount and only do the design of Fairmount Road and don't do any right-of-way acquisition or utility relocation, you would have $1 million in order to do dust abatement group 1, whatever that, in the north part of the county, at whatever location, if you want to do 187th first as a board, or if you want to have me engage the military institution and try to get funding for 159th. Either one of those I can do, but we could just set an earmark aside for that funding.
I'm concerned about the if we got a matching grant. You know, we know that the Hills Pet Nutrition is the largest industrial growth in the county in many, many, many years. I don't think we should say no to that and remove it. I think that's a mistake. But I would still think that we had the adequate fund. If we get a grant from Commerce or we get a grant from the rural road, high risk rural road, we don't want to not be in a position to be able to do that. But maybe if we did, we could kick something else back or come back and look at. I just think we need to have a mechanism if we did get a grant for that.
We do. We can bond because we're not at the. Well, but the resolution said we could bond $40 million, and we're at 36.
I'd rather.
Are you there? 36.
I mean, I would rather leave the option.
I understand that.
You know,
but if it comes to turning down a match, you should bond.
well, if we leave that in there, we're still going to have the CIP for the reduction in the cost of that bridge. I don't know if that's like $750,000 for a bridge. I don't know what size of bridge that is.
It's not big.
It's
It doesn't take a big bridge anymore to hit
to get to 750,000.
Yeah.
But we should be up to the 950,000 without removing.
We can, without dismantling your current CIP, we can put $1 million in funding in 2026 by removing 222nd Street and only doing some design work on Fairmount Road and no right-of-way acquisition or utility relocation. And that would free up $1 million.
And we'd still be starting on Fairmont.
And you can decide after we've talked to the landowners at future dates, because HP 51 is not scheduled until like 2020.
So you're depending on the 500,000 from 222nd Street.
Yeah. And researching back through the bridge records, when I prepared this originally, I found notes that were the closure of that bridge had been discussed, and there was some clear opposition from farmers and some clear support from other folks, because it is a through road between Tonganoxie Road and 187th. And so there was some people on both sides of that argument. I'd be happy to apply for the local bridge grant, because they will give us an extra $250,000 if we ever do decide to close a bridge, prior to KDOT requiring us to close that bridge. So we do have an option of getting additional funding through the local bridge program if we close a bridge. And so that determination could be made anytime between now and next year's CIP, and we could next spring use that as a leverage to try to get additional funds if through this current inspection that's ongoing right now, they find that they're going to drop that down to, say, a 4-ton bridge or something if the cracking has gotten any worse. Then we'd have 2 years before the next inspection that would actually close it. And during that time period, we could apply for additional grant funding.
It just makes sense to me for the bridge club, that one thing, that bridge club, that just makes sense. It makes financial sense. I mean,
So how much are you anticipating
we're
saving
spending
from
taxpayer
that?
dollars. I
Should
mean,
keep it, yeah.
Well, HP 51, we would need to use that money because we're putting it ahead. We're putting a Dust Abatement Group 1, the $1 million, ahead of the right-of-way acquisition and any utility relocation costs on Fairmount Road. So the next year when we'd be removing that bridge, we would need to pay for the utility relocation and right-of-way acquisition of Fairmount Road, and then you basically have taken that and shifted the 2026 funds to 2027, and then inserted this, and so you really have removed funding for the 222nd Street project and just delayed slightly your Fairmount Road.
So what happens if we decide we want to proceed with it? I mean, I think 222nd Street's a priority right there in front of this new industrial park. Where would you anticipate, outside of bonding, if we were able to get commerce funds or matching funds, where would you say we would look to the CIP?
Well, I'm confident. I have fairly strong confidence that if we apply for economic development funding through the Kansas Cost Share program, we could secure funding in collaboration with the city of Tonganoxie. However, it has been a very strong position of the Board of County Commissioners, unless you determine it to be otherwise, that once that road is upgraded, just like the city of Basor, and you guys contribute funding, that will be a city-maintained street perpetually thereafter. And so the city has more or less stated in the little bit of conversations that they are willing to have about it, that is a non-starter for them. And they have passed on the opportunity to have me write grants for that application on multiple occasions. And so unless they are willing to take over the future maintenance of that roadway as a city street, the county is not going to apply for funding for that. From the direction that you guys have provided me, that is my understanding.
Right.
So I haven't,
about annexing both sides of it.
and I guess I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've heard a lot of hyperbole, but I haven't seen anything in writing from the city or anything stating they wouldn't take the maintenance of the roads.
I think we have that in
They wouldn't take the maintenance of the roads? We've made this
After a
proposal.
completed I haven't seen anything in writing from the mayor or the city saying
I
that
don't
they
know that
were.
the city administrator has provided it to the mayor. I have provided the offer verbally and I believe in email
There's the catch.
that, and you guys went and met with the city council. It was your offer to the city council to engage in this
That's correct.
grant
That's
application.
right.
So
And-
that's not even a staff level decision. That was just
We met down and talked.
you met and
Well,
talked
I-
with them, and that was the
And I-
direction that you provided. So staff.
And I'm for that direction. Don't get me wrong. I support that. I'm just telling you, I haven't, in my conversation with them, understood that if we were able to do a matching grant, that they would not take over the maintenance of the road. More the issue that I've gotten from the city has been they don't want to match what we want to match.
They don't want to do either. We offered, and they
So-
decided to apply
Okay.
for funding for the city.
Either way,
Commissioner, let's
Anyway.
just, so we can
But let's-
hopefully move
Well,
on.
can I have just one question?
Yeah, sorry.
So what is the other option of that?
Are you
road?
asking me or him?
I'm asking anybody.
Okay.
Is it a benefit district? Can the county force a benefit district on the property owners down there?
Yes,
Can.
They could.
yeah, you can. The statutes allow that if a road that we're maintaining runs through a city, so the city, the impact, the benefit is to people in the city.
Right.
We have the ability to do benefit district. And we brought that up during the work session that we had with Tonganoxie, and they did express that was not a very favorable idea to them. If this road came up and grant funding became available, and we had to come up with a matching portion from the county, which is a lot of
Yes.
ifs. But if that happened, just like we did on 166th, we can is that right? Am I got the right street number? 158. 158. Just like we did with 158. Grant funding became available. We reprioritized. We moved another project and put that money over there because we didn't want to lose the grant funding. So we could do the same thing if something like that came up. The further out you get in this CIP, the more flexibility we have. The things that are in the next 2 years are really not
They're pretty
flexible because we've
iron-
already started.
right.
We've spent money to
Yeah, they're
acquire
set.
right away,
Okay.
move utilities,
They're
do
in the
design
queue
work.
and they need to be.
But when you get out to that year 4 and 5, if we haven't started on those projects, we can move one of those if some big grant funding became available, or a bridge failed that we weren't expecting, like a E58.
I hope we don't.
This isn't a hard and fast plan. This is a plan so we don't get surprised.
Right.
That's what this is a plan for. So if
That's a good answer.
if something
Thank you.
came up, we could do it.
And it won't be E58, obviously, but it will be the one on Evans Road, ST91.
And
That
that
will be
bridge
the bridge.
is not that old.
It's built in 1984. And,
Jiminy.
and from 1983 to 1987, KDOT's manual allowed contractors to spray what they called monkey blood. I don't know what this red chemical was over the top of
Probably
bridge
causes
decks,
cancer.
and they no longer required them to wrap the bridge in wet burlap. So a lot of the bridges in that 4-year period flashed the concrete, got too hot, and the concrete is disintegrating. Now 40 years later, that bridge is your next E58. It has icicles of salt hanging off the bottom of it. It has full penetration, and
Yep.
the recommendation from our engineer was the only thing that you have left, because it will not damage the bridge any further, is to go ahead and do a 1 or 2 inch overlay over the top of it, because you have reached the full penetration of salt. So your next bridge that will come up that goes back to the Benish is being identified by our current inspection group of, hey, they've always rated this thing to be fine. And we kind of pointed it out last time, and they're going to really strongly point it out this time, that it has full penetration of salt. It had uncoated rebar in it, and it is on floating footings.
Boy, that's
And so it is a 40-year bridge on a majorly traveled roadway that is going to need to be replaced. So just to be clear here today, ST91 is your next E58.
And by putting asphalt over, it's going to speed it up. Also,
They said it won't even make a difference because it has full penetration currently, and the deck is so degraded that it will not. It'll smooth the ride out and
Wow.
to a point that it doesn't matter.
And when's that on our list?
Okay.
It is currently on the list as a deck replacement, but there has to be quite a bit of evaluation done to the footings to see it next year.
This year.
I don't know for sure until the engineering is done whether or not a deck replacement is even an option. It may just say you have to replace the bridge in the next 5 years. In which case, we could take that $450,000 out of next year if they can't replace the deck, and they say it'll last another 5 years. We might as well get every year we can out of it.
Before you have to do that. Yeah.
It could be an emergency repair, but it is something that you should have plans on the shelf for, because it is your next E58 that a chunk. There are huge holes.
We get a couple of those. They just
The
aligned.
contractor built that.
So, Mark, is there a way to break down what tax districts, how much each tax district paid in sales tax?
No, there's not a way to do that. You can't. The state tracks it, but they do not share that with us.
I didn't think so.
But
the reason,
the reason being, it allows you to then identify certain, people, how much business they're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tracked, but we don't have access.
and that's what I thought. The reason I brought that up is it's ironic to me that my district, I'm pretty sure, pays the most sales tax, and my district got the least benefit from like what Doug's talking about, what the voters voted for to do road projects. So my district paid the most sales tax, but we got the least benefit on roads from the sales tax project.
I think that if the districts are broken out by population, then it should be a fairly equal distribution in sales tax. Property tax is probably different just because of the valuations
Right.
of the district.
Yeah.
But on sales tax,
I'm talking
if
about
you go
sales
per capita, that would be your best way of determining.
So really, I mean, you're just looking at where businesses are. That's where most of your sales tax is generated. So Fort Leavenworth and the north half of Leavenworth City, I would say contribute more sales tax than the rest of the county. So I just want to bring that up.
But you don't want to build any roads in Fort Leavenworth, do you?
Sales tax off before.
Well,
No.
Jeff, you don't want to build roads in Fort Leavenworth, do you?
One acre.
So I guess
Walmart and the car dealerships typically would be your biggest sales tax generators.
So I guess if I'm hearing
Collectors.
the board direction correctly,
Walmart.
and correct me if I'm wrong, the current direction you're providing staff is you want me to go back and take $1 million, more or less, and put it into 2026 for a dust abatement group, and then reallocate funding through it to try not to delay those projects any further than we have to, adjusting it out through 2027 and HB 51. Put that on the unfunded list and take Tonganoxie cost share off for this time because we don't have an MOU and we have no agreement moving forward to start to apply for funds.
Or any grants.
You
Yep.
okay?
Yeah, crap.
That sounds
Wait a
great.
minute.
I had a cramp on my leg.
You got a cramp.
Make sure we
I
understand.
recognize that. I recognize that.
They're getting ready to leave the room, and I'm not sure they understood what you just said about Tonganoxie Road.
So I'm going to take off the funding for
Yeah.
222nd Street. I'm going to remove HP 51, and I'm going to slide the right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation portion of Fairmount Road 1 year.
That's what we're talking about. I like
I
that.
wasn't sure you all were listening. I wanted to make sure we.
Oh, yeah. I heard.
You are continuing to
Yeah.
make application for
It's-
grants and those kind of things as well.
It's late.
I'm
Jeff was
continuing
coming over the
to
table.
apply for grants for bridges, and I will continue to apply for HRRR
Isn't that smart?
funding. But I am not in County Route 30 and all of the ones that we don't need an MOU in place on at this time. I have not applied for any. I do not intend until the board directs me to do so, and the city of Tonganoxie accepts future maintenance. Intend to apply for any 222nd Street funds.
You stretch it.
At this time, that's all right.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Jeff needs an IV.
Need a banana.
Okay, I've had enough.
That it?
Are we done?
All in, all done?
I think so.
Okay.
Work session concluded.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.